Here, here we go, everybody. It's the day we've all been waiting for. Yes, it's Friday, December 16th, 2022, and the Browns play on Saturday. They'll be taking on the Baltimore Ravens. We'll break that game down with the in my opinion, the analytics guru in all of Cleveland, and he's spreading beyond Cleveland. But you've heard not even the name. You've heard the Twitter handle. If you watch our show, if you listen to my podcast, if you listen to any of my old radio station, any place in town where there's a sports talking head, you've heard the Twitter handle ClevTA, and we are going to get to know him today, and we'll find out why everybody references him in this town when it comes to especially football analytics. And some people just straight out steal from him without crediting him, but many of us actually give him credit when we use his stuff and his tweets. And the fans know him, and we're going to break it all down today. That's coming up as we get ready for a big weekend of football on a Friday bullpen with Adam the Bull.
Podcast is not for the faint of heart.
And I do think it's time for the Browns to move on.
It's not for those who ride the fence.
He's proven nothing.
But if you're looking for someone who tells it like it is about Cleveland sports,
everybody does fandom their way.
You've come to the right place.
I don't think he's any good.
It's time for the Bullpen with Adam the Bull.
All right, we are back, and we are now joined by ClevTA on Twitter. TA, how are you, man? It's still weird, even though I've been talking to you for a long time, to call you TA. I know your real name, but I know you want to. We go by TA, and that's how everybody knows you. It's really amazing.
Good, I appreciate it. I feel like some of the things I tweet that some of the old school Browns fans don't like. I'm probably happy that I don't have my real name out there.
Yeah, I get it. It is really funny because we've accepted in baseball analytics, and I guess we didn't use the word. That's the funny thing. In baseball, we didn't use the word analytics. It's like people are scared of that word. They don't understand the word. But I want to get into it all. But first, I got to get to the most important question. Did you enjoy the season finale of White Lotus? And what should be done to people who spoil it on Twitter within 24 hours of it being out there?
I mean, I'm really glad you asked me this question. It's a very important question, and we need to have rules in place because too many people break it. I thought it was good. Look, I thought the season was fantastic. I thought it was even better than season one, which is rare to get a sequel, a second season to be even better than the first. But I thought it was great. I love the characters on the show. Good storyline. So I thought it was good. And, I'm not going to spoil it for anybody who hasn't watched. But, yeah, like way too many people. This was a Sunday night show. And, we got football. I got a 2-year-old at home and I got to deal with. And so I can't always catch these shows live. Me and my wife try to watch it the next day.
Sure.
And so way too many people were spoiling the ending and talking about it, and they just had to go to Twitter to discuss their feelings on the show. And it's like at least give us, I think the rule should be 24 hours.
Yeah.
That's the moratorium. 24 hours. You're not allowed to talk about specifics on the show. You could say it was great or it was bad or whatever, but you can't give anything away or discuss what happens for at least 24 hours. And even then, just be careful. Maybe put a spoiler before you discuss it on Twitter, but just way too many people had to break that rule, and I had to mute the word White Lotus, or the 2-word White Lotus, out of my Twitter timeline.
It drives me crazy when people do that. I happened to watch the finale on Sunday, but you're right. I often watch Sunday night shows on Monday or even Tuesday because of, especially during the football season. So it is, and a lot of people do that. I mean, most people don't watch shows live anymore except for sports. So it is obnoxious when people do that. I'll tell you, something else about that show that you don't think about it as much makes that show one of the many things that makes that show great is the music. It adds to the anxiety, right, and the drama of the show.
Not even just the music, just the settings. I mean, the great settings they've had in the 2 seasons. In Italy, and just the awesome backgrounds. And I haven't looked into. I've heard some podcasts talk about how. The creators and the producers, the way they go through. I mean, every scene, every piece of art on the wall has a meaning to the show.
Yeah,
I guess you could go on TikTok and find all the details. I haven't watched it, but they really go into detail with this stuff. And yeah, it's pretty cool. The music sets the scene, and and you're always kind of waiting because there's no real. It's like just a development of these characters, but there's no real like ending at the end of each episode. There's no like dramatic ending. It's
Right.
just constantly going, and you're just waiting for anticipation for things to happen. So I love how the show does that.
Yeah. It's the really typical TV show, which is, I think, what makes it kind of special. Tia, let's switch gears to football. But, about, I don't know how many years ago it was, like 5 years ago. I don't know. Timeline's all screwed up at this point. You had been tweeting about this stuff for a long time. And, as I said before, like people were okay with baseball, which has been using analytics forever now. And as more and more people were using it inside the game of football, but the fans, the average football fan is way behind compared to the average baseball fan in how, like when I was a kid, I would look at the win total of a pitcher or the RBIs of a hitter, and I thought those were the most important stats because what did I know? I was, kid in 1978, 79. The hell do I know? There's no analytics. If there were, I didn't know they existed. There was no internet, for crying out loud. And then, we learned. Now I don't even look at wins ever for a pitcher. And it's a non-factor. It's a useless stat in my opinion. And so things have changed, and fans in baseball, even though some fans still complain about it, it's generally accepted. In football, it is going through that transition to some degree. Within the game, it's already happened, but it's going through that transition. With the fans. Now, you've been on this for a while, and like whenever it was a few years ago, we went out for lunch because I was like, I don't know football analytics. I need to learn more, and I thought you were the go-to guy, and I enjoyed that lunch, and I learned a lot from you about football analytics. So let me ask you this. What is the biggest misconception people have when they hear that term? And should we change the word analytics just to stop scaring people, or we got to make them come around with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the issue is the definition of analytics. It really is just using information. It doesn't have to be numbers. It could just be information to help you make a better decision, make a more informed decision, whatever. And it doesn't have to be in sports. It could be anything, right? So, like when you're driving on the highway and you could go a little bit more than the speed limit because there's never any cops there, right? Like that's an informed decision. Historically, there are no cops ever on this stretch. Could probably go 10 miles over the limit and be okay. Like that's an example of analytics that people use every single day that you don't even think about. And I think the misconception with the kind of old school kind of football guy versus the new school, analytics nerds is, there's a big gap there, but there's a lot of similarities. I mean, guys have been doing this, have been using analytics and information to make these decisions for years and years in the NFL, and they don't even know it. When you go on film and you're a defensive backs coach, you may look at, hey, this week's opponent, this wide receiver, he's got tendencies, right? When he fixes his gloves, that there's a high probability that he's going to be running a route on this play. Or if he's just kind of not engaged, he just puts his arms to his side, when you look on film, he does it. And that means it's going to be a run play. And same thing with, edge rushers. Hey, look, watch this left tackle. When he has this certain stance, likely to be a pass set. Like film guys have been doing this for years. That's analytics. Like you're using tendencies to help you make an informed decision. So I think when you put it in in that type of context, I think people will look and say, all right, now I can kind of understand that, it's been around for years. This isn't like this new concept. Bill Belichick's been using it for years. He won't admit it publicly because he doesn't want to kind of give anything away, but he's been he was the first on this. He's had an analytics kind of in-house guru for like 30 years who's been helping him in this stuff, Ernie Adams. Mm-hmm. And no one, had talked about it because he doesn't make it public. He doesn't want that kind of that market inefficiency to be given out, publicly. So he doesn't give that stuff away, but he's been doing that for years. I mean, there was, if you remember, when the Patriots would play the Steelers, this is many years ago, maybe a decade ago. Pittsburgh was great run defense, but they had some holes in their pass defense, especially in the slot. And so there was a game they were going to play against the Steelers, and they came out and threw like 20 straight times in a row, and it blew everyone's minds. It's like, well, it makes sense. Like, why would you force running the football on a great run defense when you could just attack their weakness? And that is a form of analytics, is just using the information that's out there to best make your team, give your chance the highest probability. You give your team the highest probability to win, and those sorts of things. So attacking weaknesses and that sort of stuff, I think is the way a lot of smart teams do it. And so, I think in general, it's just understanding that we all use analytics in some way in everyday life, and it's just kind of how it's presented. I think that really is the gap.
I think that's a great example, or many great examples that you point out there. I think, unfortunately, some of the old school people just can't wrap their head around it, no matter how easy you make the explanation. Hopefully, a lot of those people will listen to this and say, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." But it's so hard for them to wrap their head around it. And I think there's two things that really stand out to me in the NFL. That every time it doesn't work out, or it's perceived not to have worked out, people go, "Oh, look at analytics." Going for it on fourth down and passing up a field goal opportunity to try to score a touchdown. And what drives me crazy about those things, because I'm almost always want a team to go for it on fourth down and almost always want them to go for a touchdown instead of settling for a field goal. But what drives me most crazy is that every time those things fail, the old school football guys are like, see? But when it works, we ignore it. They only bring it up when it fails. It's so funny to me. But aren't those the two areas where it gets most highlighted, you think?
Yeah, and it's like that's where my Twitter timeline gets flooded. I should stop doing it, because it's every time it drives me nuts, and I feel like I have to tweet it, and then I just get like a battle. But it really is, and that's the thing that bothers me the most. And that's, I think, the mentality on those things is where it's really hard for people to kind of they get stuck in the mud, if you will. They only look at the downside. And this is not just, when it comes to football, this comes to a lot of decision making in life.
Sure.
You only look at the downside and you never look at the upside. So like if it's a 4th and 1 or a 4th and short, or if it's, going for it at the goal line instead of kicking a field goal, I always hear the negative is always, but if you don't get it, then this happens. As I go, okay, well, what if you do get it? Why are you not telling me what the good, the upside is of getting it? Like there is that upside. That's the whole point. And so, that is the thing that is frustrating. And I think, again, I think we as, people that believe in analytics and the numbers and the data have to do a better job of explaining, outside of just saying the model or the numbers say this to go for it, right? Explaining kind of from a high level, step back and explain why it is. And I think people will understand it more and will realize, okay, that makes sense. So for example, a big one is, let's say you're inside the 5-yard line on fourth down, instead of kicking the field goal and quote unquote, I'm glad you didn't say taking the points, because that's kills me. Going for it makes sense. Instead of just saying, well, the numbers say you should go for it. Instead of just saying that, explain kind of the different nuances as to why. And I think one area that people don't understand, for one, field goals aren't automatic. That's the other thing. When you say take the points, you don't tell the ref, hey, we're going to attempt a field goal, and they just give you 3 points. No one ever thinks that there is a percentage chance that you don't actually make the field goal. So you don't just take the points if you're, being conservative. That's one. So that's part of the equation, is the field goals are not automatic. Extra points are not automatic. So that has to be factored in. Number two, when you don't get it, so if you do get the downside and you don't get the touchdown or the first down, a team will be pinned back inside the 5-yard line, for example. Right. And coaches are very conservative when they get the ball inside their own 5, right? So they're likely to just run the ball or just go quick passes, just so they give their punt team, room. And you're likely just to get the ball back anyway if you don't get it. So like that is all part of the equation. These are things that, the numbers and the analytics factors in, that the average Joe, when they don't step back and think about these nuances, they don't realize it. So when you explain it to somebody, they're like, okay, well, that does make sense. Yeah. That is true. And so it's funny when they say, take the points, and then they miss the field goal. You don't hear anybody say, never, well, why'd you take the points when you missed the field goal? So you kind of got the two areas that failed. So, it's just explaining that stuff, I think, is more important.
No doubt. We're going to take a quick break. More with ClevTA, talking NFL analytics. We'll get to some of the games this week, including the Browns and the Ravens. That's all coming up, folks. Quickly, I want to tell you that betonline.net, speaking of games, #1 source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season, basketball, and World Cup. They've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at betonline as well. Always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet Online, where the game starts. Tia, let's go back to last week's Browns game. I didn't see, for whatever reason, I didn't see your reaction to this. Maybe you didn't have it on Twitter, or maybe I forgot. What was your reaction to the 4th and 1 play that everybody's talked about, where they bring Brissett in and then they throw for the end zone? What was your thoughts on that play?
Yeah, I mean, I actually thought that drive was really good going up into that play. First of all, they should have reviewed that Watson dive, because I think that was a first down. But
I thought it was too.
I know there's I don't know the exact rule about when you give yourself up as a quarterback, if it counts if you go head first or whatnot. So maybe that's what they were, that's how they were marking the ball. But in terms of that play, like, I understand what Kevin Stefanski was thinking. When you bring Brissett in, he's known across the league. Everybody knows he's a great quarterback sneaker. And, they did it the prior week. So you bring in Jacoby Brissett. The defense is thinking, okay, let's stack the middle of the field. We're going to prevent this sneak. And he thought maybe we can trick them and run a play action and get a deep shot, because you're going to get a one-on-one outside with
right.
Donovan Peoples-Jones. I mean, I personally thought that it was probably unnecessary at that point to actually run that play. I would have gone for it no matter what. But yeah, I think with a mobile quarterback and Deshaun Watson, you can run, shotgun, spread them out, run read option, and you have two different looks at it. But I'm not going to kill him. There are things that maybe they saw on film, and then again, goes back to the old school film guys. They might have shown. I mean, defensive or offensive coaches might have said, "Hey, look, the tendency is the Bengals do this when it's a 4th and kind of sneak opportunity, and maybe we can spring one on them." I don't think that the Browns thought that they were not going to get many other chances to score. So they just wanted to jump ahead. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not going to kill them for that. I probably wouldn't have taken that risk, especially in a first drive, because scripted drives like that usually want to score. But is what it is. They took a shot and they thought they saw something, and he was open. It was just a bad throw.
Was. I want to talk. When did you start your website? Was it 2 years ago? I can't remember the timeline at this point.
Just last year, just before
just last year.
Season. Yeah.
Okay. The TA's website is Cleve Analytics, CLEV Analytics.com. And on the site, it's a great site. Now, explain. So we know about, we've talked about analytics and how teams use it, but fans can use it, and you use it to help you make educated guesses, I guess, to pick games. I know you have. I see you have golf content on there. I didn't realize. I'm not a big golf guy, but
way more football than golf.
Yeah. But football is the primary thing. Explain to the fans how they can use, through you, analytics to help them make smarter picks.
Yeah, I mean, so I have some free content from some free information on there. I also have subscribers through with a paywall. So there are two different sides of the coin here. I've got a real job. Contrary to belief, I do have a real job, full-time job, and I do have a family. So I don't have all the time in the world to do this. So my wife is like, well, you better get paid to spend time producing this content and this information. So I did have to charge. But and it is essentially a one-stop shop for anyone who's looking for, just data and statistics and analysis on each game every week. Picks. I've got, I go through all if you're in a pick 'em pool and you have to pick every game against a spread or you're a survivor pool, all that stuff, DFF. But on the free side, I also have Kevin Cole, who's a well-known guy from PFF. He actually was just let go a couple of weeks ago. And so he started posting some information on there. So you can see some of his content. It's really, really good. But, I think in general, it doesn't have to be my site. It could be any, you can find some of this data out there. I post it. There's RBs Don't Matter, rbsdm.com, which is a free site with a lot of good kind of information, analytics information. it's hard to kind of dissect and digest all that information and make picks out of it. But
Yeah.
if you want to see like, hey, how are certain teams evolving throughout the season? Are they better at stopping the run than they were the first half of the year, or versus the pass, and vice versa? Are teams really good on early downs? See, that's the thing. Early down success is really more predictive than anything else, versus late down success. Meaning, if you are getting first downs, if you're getting chunky yards on first and second down, that is way more predictive and way more impactful going forward than third down success, which is very flimsy, right? Like, we know what happens on third downs. You can get penalties on the defense. You can get on the offense too. You could get drop passes, like crazy things happen. And it's very, very, there's a high variance there. So you really want to be successful on early down. So using some of that information on the site, you can find some of that early down data. But just in general, I mean, I think just being able to recognize, hey, like the Titans, everyone thinks Derrick Henry and the Titans are a great run team. And for example, they're playing the Chargers this week. Chargers aren't great run defense. Well, the Titans are actually bottom 10 in the NFL in run offense from an efficiency standpoint.
Wow.
They just do it so often that you think they're a great run offense. So you can actually see some of those numbers from a success standpoint. Success rate is a number that I use a lot, that I think the general public should start using a lot more. And we've talked about it when we had our lunch. Mm-hmm. A lot of people use yards per carry, for example, for a running back standpoint, which is very misleading. I mean, you can have 9 rushes that get stuffed at the line and then break off a 50-yard run on your 10th run, and your yards per carry is 5. And you're like, wow, that's a good running back, or that's a good game. And it's like, well, not really. He just had one good run that was such an outlier that it skews the numbers. Success rate actually takes a look at, and it gets a little, algorithm based, but based on the down and distance, whether you're actually successful on that play or not. And you get kind of a yes. If it's a yes, it's a 1. If it's a no, it's a 0, right? You're either successful or you're not.
Yeah.
And how often are you successful on those plays? So a 4th and 1, if you're constantly getting 2 yards as a running back, you're only averaging 2 yards per carry, but your success rate's 100% because you're actually getting a first down. So long story short, but you can use that information to help you kind of ascertain, who's really producing successful results and who's not. And, if that can help you with your betting or your DFS or your, just enjoying the games a bit more, then I think that that's information that's useful.
So who is the most efficient running back right now? Or who are some of the most efficient running backs at the moment?
Oh, so you got to put me on the spot here, because
Sorry.
I'll tell you one guy who's not. So a couple guys like Saquon
Yeah.
Barkley and Kenneth Walker are guys who everyone thinks are, really good running backs. But those are guys, or the example I gave, like they get stuffed a lot. So they get a lot of negative plays, but then they break off 20 plus yards all the time. So that helps their yards per carry and whatnot. But so I'm looking at the numbers now. Actually, you'd be surprised that Cordero Patterson, Miles Sanders, and Josh Jacobs are your top 3 right now from a success rate standpoint. And I think Sanders is more a product of the offense in Philly. I think a lot of guys would do that. He's a good running back, but I think a lot of guys would do that. Josh Jacobs is the guy, and you're a fantasy football guy. I mean, out of nowhere, he was almost cut in the preseason, and he's been awesome from a success rate standpoint and just a general production standpoint. But I was talking about Saquon Barkley. He's 32nd out of 39 running backs in success rate. Wow. Kenneth Walker's 38th. So just to tell you, a couple of guys that people might think are doing really well are actually struggling from a success standpoint.
Quick break with more with ClevTA in just a moment. Right here in the bullpen with Adam the Bull. TA, let's get right back to it. From a defensive perspective, for years, people rank defenses based on yards allowed, which is mind-blowing to me, right?
Yeah.
I guess points allowed is probably better than that, but still not a fit. What to you, is it DVOA? Is that the go-to stat, analytic, whatever, to determine which is the most successful defense? If not, what is it?
Well, so DVOA it's kind of a black box. So a lot of people cite it because it's kind of been vetted as, okay, this is a really good kind of analytics metric. I think it has some flaws, and not everybody knows exactly what goes into it. So essentially what it does is it says, on a play for play basis, how did you perform versus an average offense or an average defense, and then uses opponent strength as well. So if you're just doing it against easy bad offenses or vice versa, or bad defenses, then that gets adjusted. So that is one metric for sure. I mean, I look at EPA is another one that's a little bit harder to explain, but essentially on every play you're either adding you're increasing your team's chances of scoring, or on defense decreasing, or vice versa. And so you add those all up and divide it by the plays, and you get a number, and it gets skewed by a little bit by turnovers and some high leverage plays, explosive plays. So that's another metric. So there are different ways to look at it. I look at success rate because I like to me it's more some of those broken plays or big plays both on offense and defense are not very predictive. I want to know, like, on a play for play basis, how often are you producing a positive play or preventing a positive play or not? Like that to me, I think is one that I like to use personally. So those are a couple of the metrics that I think make sense, and they all essentially derive to the same number. I personally have a database that does adjust for schedule as well. And I'll give you an example, like the Jets are a top 10 defense by every metric. They actually have faced a top 10 schedule of opposing offenses, which is rare. Usually you don't see that because offenses typically dictate how well you perform from a defensive standpoint. So, them and the Niners to me are the two best defenses in the NFL. I'll tell you a team. Okay, this is a great question. I'll tell you a team that is very overrated from that perspective: the Patriots. Okay. So the Patriots, if you look at a lot of the advanced metrics, are either number one or number two. I think New England's number 3 in DVOA. But it's so skewed because what they do a good job when they face a bad offense or a backup quarterback or a rookie quarterback. They suffocate those offenses so much to the point that they produce these outlier results that skew the numbers. But when they face competent quarterbacks and guys that are not rookies or backups, they're middle of the road. And we saw that Kirk Cousins sliced and diced them up on Thanksgiving night. Justin Fields put up 33 on them. They're very bad against mobile quarterbacks too, by the way. Put up 33 on them on a Monday night a couple weeks ago. But against Sam Ehlinger and against Zach Wilson, like those offenses have no shot. So that skews the overall numbers a little bit. So you have to, what I try to do is, instead of just looking at the overall numbers, break it down by buckets. How do you do against, maybe top 10 or top 15 offenses? How do you do against the bottom? And that helps you, you could find some inefficiencies either in the betting market or, in DFS, or just generally talking about it. And that's a Patriots. That's a perfect example. And I'll be interested to see this week, for example, they're facing a competent offense. Derek Carr he might actually be the best quarterback that they have faced this season from a pure quarterback standpoint, which is crazy, So I want to see how they do against them. So that's an opportunity. You might want to take the over or take the Raiders because their overall metrics will say, oh, the Patriots defense is great, but no, not against competent offenses. They're just average. They're an average NFL defense from that perspective. And it makes sense from a Bill Belichick standpoint. Like he preys on these bad quarterbacks and these young quarterbacks. And in fact, I'll leave you with this on this question. If you look at every single game of the NFL season this year, the 2 worst offensive performances from an advanced metric standpoint have both come against the Patriots defense. It was Wilson and the Jets, that 10-3 game, and it was Sam Ehlinger and the Colts, who had one of the worst offensive outputs we've ever seen. So that's kind of skewed the numbers. So you do have to, you can look at the overall, but you do have to slice and dice it a little bit.
Well, in that vein, I said something on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show yesterday, and I want to know your take. Am I right about this? I said that, because a lot has been made of the Ravens defense since week 9. And I said, well, in the last 5 games, they've played the Saints, the Panthers, the Jaguars, the Broncos, and the Steelers, who are 5 of the worst. Maybe not Jacksonville, but at least the other 4 teams are hideous offenses. I said, I think the Ravens defense is good, but I think right now it's a little overrated. Am I right or wrong about that?
Well, it's hard to know because they haven't faced any good offenses, right? So you don't have anything to disprove it necessarily, but you might be able to say that. I will say, since week 8, they are number one in the NFL against the run. And on early downs, on first downs, they're number one. And that'll be interesting to see. They're actually bottom 10 against the pass. And in general, for the season, they're bottom 5 defending the deep pass from a DVOA perspective. So I actually think the Browns will air it out. Again, to the dismay of a lot of the run the ball folks. It's going to be a lot of that. Just stay tuned, because I know the Browns are smart. Like, they're not going to run the ball against a brick wall when they know that they can throw it. And that's where their advantage is. So I expect a lot of early down throws. I think started to see Deshaun Watson open things up in the second half of the game last week. Started to go downfield a little bit more. I think you're going to see a lot more of that, a lot more early, especially on early downs. So we'll see. I mean, like I said, Ravens against the run have been just as good as it gets. I think Roquan Smith turns out to be a great acquisition. But it could be just the fact that they haven't really faced many great run offenses, like you mentioned. So, that's hard. Sometimes it's hard to predict exactly how good a team is in a short sample like that, because the other team's offense dictates how good you are sometimes on defense. So that'll be interesting to see. But I think in general, they're a good defense. They're a well-coached defense. So I think that at least at minimum, they're top 10. But are they, best in the league type of defense? I'm not sure. So it'll be a good test on Saturday.
So let's talk about that game. I think to the surprise of some, and maybe obviously Lamar Jackson not playing is a factor, but Tyler Huntley, their backup, is going to play, and the Browns were a 3-point favorite at home in this game. We all know what happened. They lost last week. What's your take on that game this week?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because there's so many unknowns with the Tyler Huntley. We think he'll play, but look, by the way, concussion on a short week with the new protocols, I'm really surprised that he's allowed to play. I've seen the average time missed with these new protocols is close to 9 days. I mean, I've seen, Treylon Burks has missed 2 games. Like, there are guys that have missed multiple games. For him to come back so quick raises a red flag for me. But we'll see. How good is Tyler Huntley versus Lamar Jackson is a question, because I ran some numbers last week, and using some of those EPA numbers that I mentioned, and apply that historically. Like, so I just went back through all their game logs and looked at what has each produced, and how do they stack up versus an average quarterback. And I accounted for about 6-point difference between Tyler Huntley and Lamar Jackson, which makes sense. I think if Lamar Jackson was starting this game, they'd probably be 2.5 to 3-point favorites here. And I think that makes sense. So I think the number is right on. I would lean the Browns, actually. If it's 2.5 at 3, just probably, that's probably the right number and not worry about it. But I think there could be some value here at 2.5, going on the road. The problem is Tyler Huntley only has Mark Andrews. He's got nobody else on the outside. And so any competent defense should be able to slow this team down. And so all you really need, if you can get to 20 points, if you're the Browns, I would feel very good about winning this game. I did tweet about it just before your show that since week 8, the worst team in the NFL defending the run on first downs have been the Browns, and the worst team defending the pass has been the Browns, which is crazy. They've done a really good job on third downs, which, as I mentioned, is not very predictive. So that scares me a little bit. So I would expect the Ravens to run a lot on first downs because they can, and they know that's where the Browns' weakness is. So they're just going to have to stack the line and force Huntley to throw it early and often, because, I'm not sure he's got the weapons out there. So I think it'll be a close game. I just can't imagine the Browns blowing anybody out right now, but I think it's going to be a close game, and I think they're going to open things up for Watson. And if they hit a couple deep throws, I think that's really going to change things and give them a real shot to win this game and cover.
Man, that's amazing. They're worst at both. I mean, that's hard to do.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's nuts. I wanted your take on. Let's talk about the other 2 teams in the AFC North that are in their games this week. The Steelers at the Panthers. The Steelers lose. They will have their first losing record in forever. Panthers are a 3-point favorite in that game. Obviously, that NFC South is so bad. Speaking of that bad NFC South, the Buccaneers and Tom Brady hosting the Bengals. A lot of unknowns with the Bengals: Higgins, Boyd, Hurst, although he probably won't play, and Trey Hendrickson. Bengals are a 3.5-point road favorite in that one. What do you think of those 2 games?
I don't have much on the Panthers game. I mean, they play a lot better lately. They're kind of sticking to the old let's just run the ball down your throat mentality and not force Sam Darnold to do too much. So, we'll see what happens. I actually heard that Mason Rudolph could start, which would be crazy. Yeah. I actually think Trubisky's, not that he's good, he's better than Rudolph. He can at least create with his legs, right? So if you're going to have a backup or a part-time quarterback, you want someone who can create with their legs. That helps things, helps extend drive. So, if Rudolph plays, I would like the Panthers a lot in that game. Otherwise, it's just probably just a toss-up. I think the Bengals game is really interesting. And this is just as from a not even an analytics standpoint, just a betting market standpoint. So there are these things called look-ahead lines. So they post the lines on future games, the next week's games, before the games are actually played on Sunday. So Sunday afternoon or Sunday morning, the Bengals were 2.5-point favorites in Tampa. And then they go out and they essentially blow out the Browns, and the Bucks get blown out by the Niners. The market reopens and gets bet up to 3.5, which is a huge move in the NFL to go from 2.5 to 3.5. It's not just 1 point; it's going through the key number of 3, which the highest percentage of games in NFL history have landed on exactly 3. So in a betting market, to go through the 3 to 3.5 is a huge move, and I actually think that's a little bit unwarranted based on those injuries that you mentioned. Yeah. Not only is it, Tyler Boyd's got a dislocated finger. Like, he's not going to play, and if he does play, he's going to catch. I would think a dislocated finger affects a wide receiver, right? Like, odds are low that he's going to play or be successful. Then you've got Higgins in that hamstring. Hamstrings are just so you got to be sensitive with that. Yep. So he either won't play or will be limited. So you're just essentially down to Jamar Chase. And I don't know what Joe Woods is thinking last week. Should have rolled cover. He should have just triple teamed Jamar Chase at this point. The Bengals have nobody else. And with Hayden Hurst out, it's another weapon. So you have multiple weapons gone on offense. I think the Hendrickson injury is huge. He's going to be out. He's got a broken wrist. He is their best pass rusher. It's not a very talented defense to begin with. And Mike Hilton might be out. He's their best slot corner. Yep. And they're already missing Awuzie. So I actually think that this is a good spot for the Bucks to either cover or win. I wouldn't shock me at all if the Bucks win. Look, it's still Tom Brady. The guy is he's 10-1 against the spread, 8-3 straight up. So he wins these games as a home underdog in his career. It's not very often that this happens. So he's very good in this spot. Historically, I've went back and looked when teams get blown out in the NFL, like the Bucks do. Like the Bucks did last week. So I call a blowout 21 plus points. So, pretty loose with the definition. But if you go back and look, and those teams are a home underdog the next week after a blowout loss, they cover it nearly 60% of the time. So, there is a market overreaction when teams get blown out like that. And in the NFL, if you've learned anything, even whether you wager on games or not, do not overreact to the prior week, because what happened the prior week never tells you and never predicts what happens the next week. So from that perspective, I think between just kind of the market overreaction, Tom Brady kind of getting embarrassed, and then all the injuries on the Bengals front, I think it's going to be a great game. I think it's a toss-up, and I think Bucks have a real legitimate shot to win. So that's my take on the game. I know it doesn't make you happy, but
that's all right.
They need to win this game, by the way.
Yeah. The Ravens have a much easier schedule down the stretch in terms of winning that division, because the Bengals still got to play New England, who's, not great but not easy, and they got to play Buffalo, and so we'll see. I want you to take on one more game before we let you go, and I appreciate all the time, because the Baker Bros finally had their moment, TA, after he was awful all season. They've tried to convince me that he played well for the entire game against the not the Rams. Who did they beat last week? The Raiders, right. But he did. I give him his credit. He made big plays in those last 2 drives, and they won. But now he goes to Green Bay against the Packer team that's been bad, but coming off a bye. It's supposed to be snowy and cold and nasty Monday night. Will Baker show? Are you expecting Baker to show signs of life again in this game?
I am not. I will say, look, if there's between Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay, if there's one coach that could potentially resurrect a guy like that, it would be Sean McVay. So we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But look, you got to give him credit. I bashed Baker for years. And, I actually brought up, me and Lima, we discussed in text about Deshaun Watson like 2 years ago when people were talking about an extension with Mayfield. So even after his good season, I knew that there was holes there. But you got to give him credit. To do what he did without knowing the offense and just learning the playbook in 24 hours. I'm going to give him full credit for that. And, I don't wish him, poorly at all personally. He just wasn't the right quarterback for us, at least long term. But yeah, I mean, the first 3 quarters, I think the stat was out there that from a completion percentage versus what he should have, what the expectations were based on those throws, he was like a negative 12%, which is, as bad as it gets.
Yeah.
But then the final 2 drives, he was on the money. It was perfect. He got bailed out by a personal foul call. It was pretty stupid, a late hit. And then he was also bailed by an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty on that last drive that probably, I think there was like a 3rd down. It would have been 3rd and long if it wasn't for that. And they got an automatic first. So, but he did make he made a couple good throws. And the Raiders, I have no idea why the Raiders are playing like press man to man on that last play. Richard Sherman after the game he couldn't believe it. He's like, I don't know what they're thinking. Like, no timeouts, just let the Rams throw a pass underneath, and they somehow played press and Van Jefferson beat him. And it was a great throw to hit it. So give him credit. Yeah. But I don't, I'm not thinking that this is going to turn into a Pro Bowl Baker Mayfield end of season. But Matthew Stafford, with his concussions and his injury history, could retire. They have no draft picks, so they might need a younger quarterback to develop, and maybe they'll give Baker a shot if it turns out that that's the route it's headed. But we'll see. Like, I'm not going to bury him yet, but he's, to me, he's the 25th ranked level quarterback in the NFL, 25th on an average team. He's got to have a good offensive line. He's got to have a good coach, and he's got to be protected in order to produce. And so that's kind of what he is. So that's where I see him going forward.
Folks, if you want this great analysis, insight, explanations on everything involving analytics, check out TA's website. It's cleveanalytics.com, CLEV Analytics. I'll spell that for you in case you don't know how to spell it. ANALYTICS.com. TA, awesome as always. I appreciate you taking the time.
I appreciate it, Adam. Thank you.
Well, that's going to do it for today. We'll be back on Monday to recap the Browns and the Ravens right here in the bullpen with Adam the Bull. Thanks, man.